Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest I'm very excited about this. He is a professional actor, a trained martial artist, a film producer, presenter, and a public speaker. And that's just a few things that this guy does. He goes by the name Jamie B. Chambers or Jamie Chambers. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, Christian. How you doing?
Very good, very good. I'm very happy actually to have you on the show for various reasons. Like I just said there, when I was doing the research, it was kind of one of those things where I was like, I know this guy's an actor. I know I'm going to be talking about this. But then it was like peeling an onion, like different layers. I'm like, oh, okay, he's doing this. And then this thing. And then, okay, wow. Okay. It's awesome.
Well, I'm really excited to be on the show. I'm looking forward to it.
No, it's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for agreeing to do this. Let's just jump straight into your acting. When did you first start acting?
So it's almost 10 years now. December 2010-ish. I was in a completely different career. It was, it's a lifetime away now, but it was in a career that I was no longer happy with. I was in a very low place, and I don't deal with regret very well. So I'm very much, I need to know. So 22nd, 23rd December, I phoned work. I was like, I'm not feeling this. And what had happened was I'd watched Transporter that morning,
right,
with Jason Statham, and running around the bus garage, massive fight sequence, and it's the iconic moment where he puts the motor oil on the floor and uses the bicycle pedals to do this like sort of beautiful fight sequence, which is like equal parts brutal and equal parts choreography. And so yeah, I phoned work and I was like, I'm not coming back. This, you can take this as my notice. And so from there, I knew nothing, completely untrained, no contacts in the industry, nothing at all. But I made myself a free profile on, I think it might have been Star Now, thinking about it now. Made a free profile on the website, and then first week in January, so barely a couple of weeks in, with just some sort of really shoddy like photos that I'd taken, just as like, didn't know what a headshot was, didn't know what a showreel was. I got a phone call, can you come in and do an audition for us? And it was for this drug awareness video. And I mean, it's probably testament to how ropey I must have looked. So went in, and I think it really played to my advantage of not knowing what I was getting myself in for. That it was probably the most natural casting I've ever done. And it was to play this guy who met the guy, a lovely guy. He was a drug addict, alcoholic, all these sort of things. He had a really awful life, and he reeled it all off to me. And in comparison, I've been completely sheltered compared to that. So he said all this stuff to me. I was completely dumbstruck. And then the director was like, right, everything you just heard, deliver it to camera. And so, yeah, that was like trial by fire. But it was really cool because the feedback I got from it, people actually were messaging me saying, we need to have a chat. I was like, about what? And they were like, we didn't know you had drug problems and alcohol problems. I was like, I don't. So for me, it was like, that was the perfect feedback. And I mean, if I'd been awful at it, if it was one of those things where like I just couldn't get into it, at least I'd know. And that was the whole regret thing. It was like, at least I know. And yeah, I just ran with it from there.
How many acting lessons had you had at that point?
Literally zero.
Wow.
No performance training, no formal acting development or progression or anything like that. No workshops. It was purely a case of completely green going into a situation. But it was great, and chatting. I'm one of those people where I'd rather learn everything and know everything, and I'd rather the burden of knowledge than the burden of ignorance. And it was one of those where like, yeah, it gave me a taste for it, and immediately I was like, right, I need to know more. I need to understand this. And I have done a lot of training since then, but prior to that, literally nothing.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because that's the same experience I had. I started acting last year, and it was purely off just someone's suggestion. Like, I'd never done acting before. The last time I'd even done anything close was like at school, and
Yeah.
you know, it's fun, but I never really thought anything of it. I was always like music guy and creative guy, you know. I just, yeah. And then I did the role, and I was like, huh, okay, this comes quite naturally. This feels good. I might do this more. And then I just have been doing it ever since. Was it kind of like that in that first experience? Did it kind of just
Yeah.
naturally came? Yeah.
I think it's very rare for actors to be square pegs in round holes. I think if you don't have a taste for it, if you don't want it, it's never going to work. And you'll know as soon as you get on a film set. You'll know as soon as the cameras start rolling, and you're either going to be deer in the headlights, or you're going to thrive. And I mean, I've had it recently where I had 5 pages of dialogue dumped for me 20 minutes before shooting, with an accent, with various other things going on, with a load of complicated terminology and stuff like that. But for me, it was like, challenge accepted. Let's do this. And I think you're either one or the other. There's no sort of middle ground with that. It's either you'll embrace it and run with it, or you'll want out straight away. I think it's pretty much the same with yourself. Like, it's a case of, if you got that taste for it, it was the right thing. It was meant to be. And if it was like, I'm not feeling this, you just go.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you with that. I think that kind of applies to everything really in life. Like, I think there is always this like sense of fear as well. Like, you spoke about like your previous career, and you're like, one day it's like, yeah, I just can't hack this anymore. And I had a similar realization, I think, either at university or the subsequent years after. But I was kind of thinking like, you know, this is fine, this pays the bills, but I don't feel like, I don't love this, you know. And I feel like if you really want to be happy in life, you need to be doing something that's, you know, that you're motivated by, that you wake up in the morning, you're like, let's do this. I want to do this. I want to immerse myself in this. And I certainly,
there's a few cliches that work with that, because I mean, I'm not one for like my Instagram will say different, but I'm not one for like just spouting motivational script. But it's that whole thing of you've got to have a love for something, otherwise you'll end up resenting it. And that's a big thing with the performance arts in the first place. The reason people perform and the reason people get into that is purely because of that love for it, and that willingness to go down different avenues and take their passion further. And if you love it, you don't work, because it's that enjoyment. And it is that cliche, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And that's the real testament to it.
I remember the first time I heard that saying, I was like in a bad place in my life. I was sort of, not because when you say this, people always assume like, oh, he was doing drugs or something. And it's like, not necessarily. I think like for me, I had to beat that negative mindset that I think a lot of people have, where it's like anytime they even sort of contemplate doing something, taking a risk, it's like, oh no, but what about this? Oh, I don't think I can do this. And if you have people around that reinforcing that, it's even worse. So
very much.
Yeah, you've got to like overcome that.
It's the key thing now that mental health is such an important facet of it, and having that sort of positivity about things is incredibly important. And if you have negative reinforcement, that's always going to stop you and hinder you. And it's either you've got to remove yourself from that toxic environment in the first place. I mean, I've never worked a normal job in my life. I mean, I was a barista maybe for like 6 months when I was 17, but that was while I was doing another career and another thing and another thing. So it's very much a case of like, if you find yourself in the environment you don't like, you've either got to leave it or you're going to get sucked in and consumed by it. And you're right. The whole thing about when you say you were in a bad place, people do go straight to the very end of what the negative could possibly be, but there's this whole grey area in the middle of what a bad thing is. And I mean, I've had my own bouts with depression and comfort eating and things like that, and so very, very ugly things. But if you never address them, that consumes you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I often, unfortunately, suffer with that too. And the one thing that I found in terms of like overcoming it is working, burying myself in projects, having stuff to work towards. Because I feel like I don't want to get too far off the path, but since we're talking about it, in the previous positions I've had over the years, you know, in like customer service or marketing or whatever, it would always get to a point where there were things that I began to hate, and you know, it sits on you and it weighs on you, and there's always a point where like I think like people get pushed, do you know what I mean, like to their limit, and it's like, am I going to quit and just work somewhere else, or am I going to actually do something about it and change things? And that's
you've either got to work for your goals, or you're going to work for someone else's at the end of the day. And that it is very black and white. Your passion and drive is elsewhere, in which case you're just doing that to sustain, or you've put your passion and your goals into your work, in which case you start to enjoy your work more.
What do you mind if I quickly ask, like, what were you doing just before you made the transition to acting? Like, what was the role in?
I was working in football.
Football?
I was goalkeeper coach at Brentford, and working with the England ladies setup.
Wow.
And it was being a goalkeeper was something I did have a passion for. I think you have to be a little bit special to want to have footballs kicked at you perpetually. But it was one of those where it just wasn't the right environment for me. As much as it's quite a positive environment overall, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that are quite ugly, and for me that was sort of dragging me down and sort of spiraling quite a bit. So some people thrive when there's a lot of negativity around them, whereas others, for me personally, it was a case of I had to go and find my positive environment.
Yeah, fair play. Yeah, same here. I found a lot of the people I've come across in music, in, you know, the YouTube scene, acting, everything, like everyone loves to be there. But particularly with acting, it's interesting. Like I found I had like so much in common with the people, you know, working on the cinematography or the setup and everything. Like they're just as excited to be there as everyone else. Do you know what I mean? It's like they love what they do, and it's very, very. I think it's one of those things as well. Like you need to enjoy working as well.
With film and TV, you've got to want it. Otherwise, you're just not going to ever enjoy it. Because I mean, the tagline for the entire industry is "Hurry up and wait." So like, so it is exactly that. So you will spend times like where you're sat there for 12 hours doing nothing for the entire day, and then it's that rush, last minute, it's golden hour, and you've got to get everything done. You get one take and that's it, and it's never quite perfect. But if you don't love it in the first place, then you're never going to enjoy that.
I was an extra in Christopher Nolan's Tenet movie recently. I just happened to be in Estonia, where he was filming one particular part, and it was exactly like you described. And the frustrating thing for us was that like there was about maybe 3,000-4,000 people in this main stadium area who were sitting the whole time, which sounds great, but actually that is kind of difficult as well, because, you know, they were there for 12 hours plus maybe 15 hours a day, I think it was. And, you know, it's middle of summer. These people have never acted before. They're just random people on the street. So it's like trying to explain to them, like, shut up, be quiet, do it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to tell me or the other 15 actors that are doing it regularly. We know what to expect. But it's exactly like you said, like we'd be waiting there all day because I guess we were like a specialist group or whatever, but we were all dressed up really nicely, right? So we're waiting around, like, and then it would be like in the final hour, like, oh yeah, we want you to get up and do this scene now, and you're like, really?
Yeah.
Like, we're all exhausted at this point. But what I would say, like on that note, is and I imagine you can appreciate this because a lot of your roles have been a mixture. Like there's been like extras in major movies, and then like being the lead actor as well. I think being an extra is like very kind of like, it's good if you've never had acting experience, then it's pretty cool, like just as a first kind of initial thing. But I think once you do like a couple of them, you kind of realize like, you don't really get much, like you don't really get to do much acting, to be honest. Yeah. Like, I mean, because when I was looking at some of the roles that you were doing, I was thinking like, oh, that's interesting. You know, like you were involved with, say, like for instance, you were in a Star Wars movie, and I was like, that's got to be fun, dressing up, doing that. But the day to day is less fun. It's like fun on the first day, and then but maybe you're shooting for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks or longer. Then it becomes like almost like a 9 to 5 in a way. Like you just get, because that was what it was like for us. We'd wake up, go to the set really early, get dressed, have our food, wait, and then wait until we get told to do something. Whereas I don't feel the same when I do like an actual acting piece where I'm like the lead or like a supporting actor or something, because I feel like that's rewarding. Even if you do have to wait around, you still get to act at some point. Like for you, I don't ask which you prefer, but like, how do they compare generally for you as a professional actor?
So I lucked out because I've got quite a varied skill set. So I get roped into a lot of things where a specific thing is needed, whether it be combat or
right.
And any of those sort of things where I've gone away and learned something, or it's a case of right place, right time. So Star Wars was a perfect example of, I just finished on Fury, and I'd been on Fury from day one to wrap. And so going from Fury to Star Wars, it was one of those where it was like right place, right time, right people, and couldn't be more appreciative. For me personally, my first agent said something that was very important, and it was, I was like here, there, everywhere, just like, oh yeah, I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do that. And he sat me down and he was like, you've got a choice to make. You can either be a talent or you can be the talent. Mm-hmm. And it was that choice of, right, I have to cherry pick what I'm doing now. And it's a longer process and it's a more arduous process. But for me, it was a case of tailoring everything down a very specific avenue. So enjoyment wise, it's horses for courses. It's whatever comes on the day. Like you luck out sometimes with some very cool stuff that you weren't expecting, whether it be combat or driving or anything like that, or you just happen to do one cool gag on that day. But it's also the days where you've got 20 pages of dialogue to get through and you're up against it and you've only got 2 hours to get it done. So for me personally, it's all of it. There is no level really in that. It's if the project's good, if the people are good, and that's the main thing for me, is working with good people. That's 100% the main thing. And I've been quite lucky. For the vast majority, I'd say like 99% of the time, I've worked with good people, and that makes everything better, even on the worst day.
But I reckon that, like, because as you said, you're multi-skilled, you can be used in different areas. Like from the director's perspective, it's like you're kind of like an ideal candidate, if you know what I mean. It's like, okay, this guy, he can act. I can just have him in the background if need be. I can use him for the stunt scenes. I don't have to employ extra like stuntmen. You know, it's like almost like a multi-skilled, multi-purpose guy.
The one thing I would say is the stunt guy. I mean, I've got a lot of stunt friends, and what they do is incredible. It's something that for me personally, love to perform my own stunts, but to be a stuntman, I think is an incredible talent to have. They're amazing people. Some of my closest friends as well. And for them, stand there in awe, and I'll watch a friend fall 30 feet off something or set himself on fire or whatever the case may be, you know. Yeah, that sort of stuff is just incredible. But yeah, being multi-skilled, it can't hurt. That's the main thing with that. The point is that there's a very fine line at the very end of that where if you are, don't want to say too skilled, but if you tell everyone you can do everything, you end up doing nothing. Because you're that jack of all trades and you do your little bits, but then you're never seen as a specialist in certain areas. And so that sort of does play against you a little bit. So there's a balancing act to be done. Like sometimes you leave stuff off your CV or you don't put stuff in your show reel, and then it's a nice surprise that you can do it afterwards.
But given that you're doing like a lot of different things, I mean, where is your head fully at? Do you know? Because like right now, I'd say, based on what I've read, like the two main kind of things that you're focused on are acting and film producing, right? But film producing, in your career is more of a kind of a recent thing that's happened in the last sort of 2 years from the information I have here. So like with that in mind, I mean, are you kind of saying like to the rest of those things, like, okay, these are extra things I can do, but principally my head is in these two areas? Or
you have to have one main avenue. It's kind of very much like a tree. You have to have your main health through the middle, and then you can branch out. And using the acting as the main vehicle is 100%, because with acting, I can be a public speaker, I can be a presenter, I can be a performer. I can tie all those things based on just making sure my acting is on point. And that's something where I'm the weird guy on the train that will sit there and practice voices, or will be muttering to myself about a monologue or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I'm that guy as well.
It's great because no one sits next to you. And then, but yeah, so with that, it's like then I can I've used that to learn about every job in film. So I know what a gaffer does. I know what DOP does. I know what the first, second, and third do. And with that, it helped me move towards being a producer, because it was if you understand people's jobs, you understand how a film set works. Because a film set is a living, breathing organism in itself, and if one department doesn't work, everything else breaks down. So from that, I've been quite lucky in terms of a fantastic business partner who has been in the industry for 30 plus years now. So there's been a real sort of guiding force with that. And he's done some incredible things, like he was on Batman and Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, so you don't get much more high pressure environments than them. So so yeah, for me, it's having those two main points, and then everything else can branch off from that. I'm a keen advocate of, like I say, mental health, and I'm starting a thing called the Anyone Can Do Anything, which is testament to, much like lockdown. I gave myself a massive list of things to do in lockdown, and it was like start of March, I had like 50, 60 things that I'd written down. It was get my voice reel done. It was learn bow staff, start learning to sing properly, and all these things that tick them off. Lose a ton of weight. But what it inspired me, because I was like, I'm just a jack of all. I'm nothing special at all, and it's purely a case of not at all. And it's applying your mind to things, and with that, it's a case of right. I have one thing that I've got to do, and I've got to put this much effort in to make this work. And now I need the video evidence of it as well. So, if you ain't got a video, it didn't happen.
Fair play, yeah.
There's a thing called the 1397 rule.
Okay.
And it's one thing, 3% of your time, and 97% of your effort. So you take something, and 3% of your time a week is 5 hours. And if you can, so I'm learning languages at the moment. I'm learning sign language, French and Spanish.
Cool.
And it's a case of I'm putting 5 hours of work into learning languages a week, and I'm picking up weapons for 5 hours a week, and then I'm in the gym for at least 5 hours. So it's all the little things, and then you get to the end of the week and you've put in like 40, 50 hours of work. So it's just it changed my mindset a little bit.
That's interesting, you know. I mean, because I used to apply that, well, I still do apply that concept whenever I do gym training. Like, I quickly realized like it's much more effective to do, say, like 20 minutes cardio, rest, 20 minutes weights, rest, and like everyone has their own style, but and like what works for them. But at the same time, like I still find that concept is much better than, say, I don't know, doing weights for 2 hours straight or an hour cardio. Do you know what I mean? Because there's people who do that, and I just feel like
I'd be very impressed with anyone doing that.
you've seen them. I've seen them. It's crazy. You know, there's been times I've been at the gym where, yeah, I'm doing my set, going back and forth, and I see the same guy on, you know, I don't know, chest press for an hour, and I'm like, how and why?
Yeah.
just what's the point? Because I feel that it's ineffective in many ways.
I used to be a PT, and so I've got the burden of knowledge with being a PT of what it takes, and I couldn't do that job, and I have massive admiration for anyone who can be a personal trainer. But for me, you can take a horse to water, but you just can't make it drink. And I love the fact that PTs are so motivated and they want to help people and that sort of thing. But I was struggling enough with my own body shape, let alone trying to tailor it for other people. And I was of the opinion that if I'm not in perfect shape, why the hell is anyone going to listen to me? So I wrote that off, and it was something that know everything about it, but I had to apply it to myself first before I could apply it to anyone else. And now that, I mean, you know yourself, it's purely an aesthetic industry when you're in film and TV, and everyone's looking at you for what you look like first. Your headshot is your calling card, your show reel. So no one meets you before they already know everything they need to know about you. Yeah. So yeah.
Would you say that there's like a lot of toxicity in the film industry? Because we hear often outsiders, you know, hearing inside that, like, as you say, there's a lot of focus on the aesthetics, and while I understand that, you know, that is important for various reasons, you know, these stories do kind of still come out of, like, I don't know, certain directors are maybe not so great, or there's like a bad atmosphere on set where people aren't happy, or maybe even just other actors, you know, being a bit too egotistical or something. Because like my mindset is I've never had an ego, I never will have one. You know, I did when I was like really young, and then I grew up, but like not everyone does. Do you know what I mean? And
I think the first thing with that is film and TV is everyone's second job. Everyone has an opinion on film and TV because everyone watches film and TV. So immediately everyone else can have that opinion. Whereas not everyone can have an opinion on banking or insurance or being a chef, because you can't relate. Whereas watching an actor perform, people can relate. So from that side of things, I don't think it's any different from any other industry. In terms, you're always going to get bad apples. You're always going to get scandals. You're always going to get negativity. The difference is that it, as an industry, brings a lot more positivity on the whole than most other industries. So
is this in terms of the product or what it's producing?
Yeah, because the fact that people can binge watch a show or a series of films, or can rewatch something over and over and get that enjoyment, is already 100% something that you don't really get from a lot of other industries, because you can do it in your own home, you can do it on your phone. I mean, with streaming services now, I mean, I cane YouTube regularly, and I mean, lockdown, I've got a multi-screen setup where I do my work on the main screen, but I've got my distraction screen and another screen.
Exactly, so, like, the same.
Yeah. So from that side of things, there's always going to be rumors. There's always going to be that thing where someone has heard or said something, and there's no smoke without fire. But in saying that, if you don't witness it, if you don't see it, if you can't testify to it, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt. And until you witness it for yourself, then for me personally, what I do is I operate on the three monkeys. I hear no evil, I see no evil, I speak no evil.
Okay, yeah.
I'll call out wrongdoing when it happens, and I'll call myself out if I've slipped off, if I've been too hard on someone or whatever it might be. It's very much a case of trying to be the best you can be in that situation. And some people, if there is a certain reputation about them, it's because they've been in somewhere long enough that there's a reputation to be had. So for me personally, I think it's just a case of horses for courses, and what one person's personality is against another's. There's always going to be a clash at some point. And that same person that someone's had a negative experience with, 15 other people might get on really well with. So yeah, I mean, I've had and witnessed horror stories on sets, but equally that might be someone's bad day, or that might be the culmination of a 6-month shoot, working in the rain. The food was bad that day and they haven't had a coffee and it's just a snap. That's all it is. So yeah, I take everything at face value, and then you dig deeper afterwards.
What's the most unprofessional thing you've ever seen?
That's a naughty question.
You don't have to give names or anything. I won't, we're not calling anyone out, but
I saw hard balls of mud being thrown at extras on one particular film.
By the crew?
No, by actors.
Oh wow!
And then other things, refusing to put makeup on, or putting too much makeup on, or hiding on set, sleeping on set. I've seen it all, but in saying that, like I say, it's someone's bad day, or they haven't slept, or So for me personally, it's I smile and I go, fair enough.
I gotta say, I do think you make a very good point. But like I feel, what you were saying before about how everyone can have an opinion. I do agree that that's true, but I think the type of opinion you can have is varied. And what I mean by that is when you start working in the industry, you begin to understand like those horror stories a bit more. Like, for example, this just comes to mind based on what we've been saying, but do you remember about 5 or 10 years ago, there was some sort of issue with Christian Bale, like just shouting at someone, and it was something to do with lighting. I think he was in the middle of an intense scene and someone's fucking around with pardon my language, but like with the lighting, and they shouldn't have been, basically.
I actually don't have an issue with that. You wouldn't get the spark or the gaffer having people touch their stuff, and the gaffer was wrong for doing that in the first place. At that moment, not because he was doing his job, but just you've got things where you've got to respect the eye line. You've got to take time, and if you have built yourself up, and Christian Bale is a perfect example of someone who has to live the character. With his body shape. I mean, I think he's more Stanislavski than Method, but with his way of doing things, he has to do it there and then. He's built himself up to it. He's got himself in a certain, like, you look at the body shape he got in for the Machinist, the Batman, when he was playing Dick Cheney, the huge changes he goes through. He's living that character. So when someone pulls him out of that, I think it's justified to a greater or lesser extent to pull someone out for it, because they won't do it again. And a lesser, in terms of name, performer might have just bundled through, and it might not have been a great performance. But if Bale was worried about, because your product as an actor is what is seen here, that's it. Everything else afterwards, no one sees the prep and no one sees the post. They only see here. So for that moment when the cameras are rolling, quiet on set, that's got to happen. And as soon as you hear, do your job, by all means.
This is the thing, yeah. Well, I
think I think it's a justification thing, and it wasn't just Christian Bale. There was a whole thing with Russell Crowe, and
Yeah.
so it happens. And personally, I think it's a case of you're being interrupted doing your job.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not 100% against what Bale did.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same opinion. I think like my just the underlying point with that was that like the first time I heard that, I heard, I think I heard a bit of the clip and I was like, oh, that's bad. He shouldn't talk to people that way. And then I listened to the whole clip, and then I found out about the context of the situation. Yeah. And then, of course, I started getting into acting and working on sets myself. And then I just got it. I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, no, he had a right to do that. And I think particularly the one thing that people don't realize as well is that when you're acting, if you're going through like an intense scene and you're having to touch on like certain emotions that you don't always like touch on, if something like that happens, it throws you off. And like I know when I do it sometimes, like sometimes I'll just, if something was off mid scene, I'll just say, I'll cut, and then I'll just stop and compose. Like I won't try and bundle through, as you put it. Like it's got to be done properly and done well, and you need like silence and the right atmosphere and stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. For me, I'm quite the opposite, because
okay.
I worked with Tom Radcliffe, who worked with Sanford Meisner. So I basically got Meisner technique from the horse's mouth, which was awesome in itself. And I've gone back and I've watched all of Sanford's old DVDs and things like that. And for me, it's the imaginary circumstance that interests me. So I'm never calling on my own personal emotions. I'm never calling on anything that is intrinsic to me. So with that, I using the phrase, I can bundle through a scene even if it goes a bit sideways, because I don't need to reset. And I think it's a lot safer, Meisner, than some of the other techniques, because you can regard your emotions much like tools in a toolbox. And if you keep using something that's intrinsic to you, that is personal to you, and you keep using it over and over and over, it gets blunt. And then it's not yours anymore. It's something that was yours. Whereas with Meisner, for example, if you use the imaginary circumstance, immediately it's something that you've created that is only real for that moment. And then you're out. And then you come back into it. And that, for me, it's a lot more versatile. It can be utilized a lot more effectively. And it also accommodates for a lot of the stuff that can go sideways on a film set. Someone misses their cue, someone falls over, the lights go out, any number of things. So yeah, I think with that, it's a case of you'll find what works for you. And like for me personally, I'd rather have a whole bad take than half of one. At least I can pull something from it afterwards.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I said that, like I've only done that a few times. Like if I was just completely thrown. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, no, I think we do differ there a little bit. But the difference with me is I don't really touch on specific things. I try to think like, I don't want to call it method acting because it's not.
That's very dangerous thing. I have huge respect for anyone who is a method actor. For me personally, it feels a little bit borderline selfish, method acting, because it is all about you and what you're doing. I mean, I couldn't live with Abraham Lincoln for 6 months, for example. So I do.
Oh no, yeah, no, that stuff is crazy. I when I hear stuff about that, actors doing that, I get the mentality of it, but I kind of feel for the crew and everyone else that has to put up with that, because that's not easy to deal with. Like for me, what I do is I like focus on that particular moment and trying to get into that mindset. So like, I don't know if the character is like really depressed, for argument's sake, and I'm not in that mood at all, I've got to try and get my head into that space. But I guess with method actors, they're very much, I suppose the best scenario would be if they've really just cut themselves off and they're not associating with anyone. They're just kind of coming onto the set and doing their thing and then coming off. Whereas if they're just, you know, I don't know, sitting in catering, just like, that's just a downer for everyone, really. But yeah, I get what you mean. I get what you mean. Actually, it's interesting you brought up Mazner technique. I wanted to ask you about this. I did Google it and look into it, but I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And I figured, well, that's probably fair because, I mean, these things take time and you have to study them, right? The only thing I could really understand was that it was somehow similar to method acting, but not at the same time.
I would say it's on the spectrum very far removed from method.
Okay, right.
It's the idea is that you don't use anything that's intrinsic to yourself, or try not to. The idea is that you can use a circumstance that is completely imaginary. So, for instance, I have to do a scene with someone and it's a heated argument. To assist with that and the emotion of that, before the scene, you think something of that person can't possibly be true in any way, shape, or form. It's completely imaginary. But for that moment, that is the reality of the situation. And that affects how you speak to them. That affects your tone. That affects your intonation, your intention. And it's little things that pick up in the reality of how you deliver dialogue, which is so important. So with Mazner, you're using the reality of the moment, but you're not living it outside those moments. You've still got action. You've still got cut. For me personally, I don't want to live a character any other time other than from action to cut. Yeah. I want out, and I want to go back to being stupid and doing normal things like annoying the DOP or trying to annoy the Sandman. But all those sort of things. So for Mazner, it's safe, it's comfortable, and there's a real sort of visceral reality to it in terms of I do a lot of rep work where it's just bouncing back and forth, and you do get some real stuff come out where people will admit things that they wouldn't normally admit, like they're scared or they're tired or they don't like you, whatever it might be. I actually really annoyed Tom because I've got a really long fuse, like a really long fuse. I don't get annoyed quick. And he had written down what he thought of me on a piece of A3 paper.
Oh my God.
His genuine thoughts about me. I still don't know to this day. And then he ripped it all up and put it on a table in front of me. And I've got a scene partner that I'm working. And all it is rep. All it is chucking words back at each other. And when you feel like naturally you want to change that word, you change it. So started off with blue eyes and just saying that. And then you have blonde hair. You're annoyed, you're annoying, and so on and so on and so on. And my scene partner had to stop me from putting back together this piece of paper. So that, and my task was to put the paper back together. And she came in, she immediately blew it all off the table. I was like, that's funny. I like that. And immediately got up, started picking them up the floor. And she took some of them and threw them away. And I was like, okay. And this went on for about 15 minutes, at which point Tom went, all right, stop. Jamie, why aren't you annoyed? And I was like, because I genuinely find this funny.
Yeah.
But that was the natural thing with that was there was no end goal in terms of if you had to be annoyed or you had to be happy or you had to be anything else, but it was finding where it went. And so it's a real safe way of doing things, and I recommend it to anyone. I think it's an awesome technique to use.
Yeah, I might try that out myself, actually. That sounds brilliant. And I understand it so much more. You took, a couple of minutes there to explain it, and I'm like, I get that. Whereas when I read it online, I was like, what?
I think with acting techniques as a whole, they have to be slightly overcomplicated in order to deter and differentiate. But by deter, what I mean is people that were just sort of feeling their way in. If you want it, you'll go for it. If you're not quite 100%, you'll probably give it a miss. And then it's
Okay.
also differentiating, because a lot of them all come from Stanislavski, and a lot of techniques have their roots based further back in one sort of parent technique, and then they all sort of filtered down, sort of method over here, and you've got Cunningham and various other ones, and then you've got Meisner, and each one's different. And my Meisner is Tom Radcliffe Meisner, whereas another Meisner might be actor Temple Meisner. So each one is slightly different, but it's using it as a tool as opposed to using it as a blueprint.
Right.
So what I mean by that is that you don't have to do everything with every technique. So for instance, I did a BFI festival film a couple of years back, and it was about the loss of a child, and there's some really sort of heart-wrenching moments in it. And I admit I cheated a little bit with this one. I had watched the day before the Patriots Day with Mark Wahlberg, and the film didn't affect me in the slightest until the interviews at the very end with the actual people that were being played in the film, and that got me. And I teared up, and it was I felt that. So got on set the next day, went on YouTube and got the credits for Patriots Day.
Yeah. And
in between takes was I looked so rude because I looked like I was on my phone in between takes, but what it was is I was getting myself into some sort of. So normally I wouldn't do that. Normally I'd find, but on that day that's what worked for me. So I stole that. But on other days it'll be just something that intrinsically upsets you or intrinsically gets you a little bit worked up. I find talking about horror movies will make my eyes well up, and that works 100% of the time. And it's just a reaction I have to something that I enjoy, and my eyes well. So, like I was talking about the scene in Signs with Mel Gibson, where there's a lightning strike and the alien is on the roof, or where it's the found footage and the alien walks across the alleyway. Like those scenes, if I talk about it in depth, I start welling up, and then I'm like, right, let's go, and I'm in.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, that's sort of like the metaphysical side of it. That's more like the psychology of it and how you do that socioculturally. Whereas you can just do it physically. I mean, I've got a tear stick, which is basically just Vicks, and you just wipe it under your eyes, and that works too.
Wow, I never knew there was like actual practical things that
yeah, it's legit called tear stick. And little things like that. I mean, that's more practical, and that's like more of a last resort. That's or right, we're gonna do one where you're crying, but I'm not ready. Okay, quick, and then just like.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. Moving forward, what have been the sort of biggest challenges that you faced as a professional actor?
Learning that you've got to have the hustle. You've got to be able to go it yourself. I think as a society, as a community, we have fallen into waiting for things to happen, and it's down the road. Good things will come, and it's unthinking that. I've had a few things happen to me recently that have sort of reset my mindset a little bit. But for me, it was understanding that the hustle is daily, the hustle is hourly. I mean, before I came onto this call, I'm editing my motion capture and my voiceover reels, because it's like a show reel's not enough. You've got to have your show reel, then you've got to have your action reel, then you've got to have your motion capture reel and your presenter reel and your voiceover reel, and then you might have enough bits. So I was doing that because that's my hustle right this second, and so that was the hardest part. And then it's kind of like a jigsaw. It was finding, right, what training do I need and what training don't I need, because you can get lost and you never come out of that hole. Like, oh, I've got to go and do 3 years, or I've got to go and do 6 months here. And once you've committed to that, it's very hard to escape is the wrong word, but when you find that you're going down the wrong path, it's very hard to get across again. So finding what's right is a very hard thing to do. and I'm lucky in terms of the fact that I got a great experience with the Poor School, and then everything else I did vocationally. Like working with Tom Radcliffe was outstanding. He's one of the best acting teachers. Could recommend him more. But then also, I'm very OCD, logical. Lots of paperwork. It just everywhere. But my business partner at the moment has sort of reminded me that you've got to be a people person. So as much as I have from my degree and from being a logical person, that ability to knock out finance options and understand how film works from a logical standpoint, the hardest thing 100% is understanding how people work and being a people person, which I hold my hands up. As much as I'm nice to everyone, I don't always understand everyone. And that's something that that's 100% the hardest thing to do as an actor, is to be personable. I think if you're not humble, you're never going to be humble, and it's never going to come across. I think humility is ingrained, so that ability to put the light on someone else, you either have that or don't. But that ability to be empathetic is universal, and like for instance, little things. You hear rap and you see people gunning to get de-rigged, whereas other people are picking up mats and helping gaffers move tripods and whatever it might be, or helping people up that have been playing a dead body for 4 hours, you know. So yeah, it's that for me is the hardest part, is the people side of it, and appreciating people and being someone who is appreciative of what goes on, because it's very easy to get lost. So yeah, as much as the training is hard, training you have to do. And as much as building up your skill sets and things like that benefits, if you're not a people person or you're not able to engage with people, you're going to fall down.
I do also think, based on what you just said, that there is a big, you gave that example of, there are people that are rushing to end, and people that want to and go home, and other people that want to, just help. And I think that also comes down to work ethic and stuff. Like, I can't count of how many different jobs I've had in various industries where, I mean, for many people, it is just a job. And I find that kind of interesting in the realm of the film industry, because of just the nature of how interesting it is. Like, I get that the days are strenuous and they can get tedious, but like at the same time, you're doing what you love. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can think I've had so many jobs where like I've tried to love it and just can't. You know what I mean? Like,
but with film and TV, there is that line as well where some of it is the 9 to 5. That's it. And that if you are in certain departments where you're only working because it's a job you're good at, and it just so happens that it's a job you're good at in film, it's still your 9 to 5. Whether it be art department, gaffer, sparks, props, it's still your 9 to 5 job. It just happens to be in film. So
okay.
there's a grey area with that. I don't think everyone can be in the film industry in every department just for the love of it. I think some people have been to art college and are fantastic at making props, and that marries up well, or they're very good at set design, those sort of things, and that just happens to be very beneficial in film and TV. Same with makeup. You go from working on music videos and model shoots, and then suddenly you're sat doing prosthetics on an orc, and so all those sort of things. It can be someone's 9 to 5, and I do appreciate that, and it's just that passion sort of blurs the lines somewhat.
Yeah, you make a really good point there. I'd never considered that, so fair play. Let's move a little bit to your studying and your studies. Like, you mentioned you have a degree. Is that before acting or is that in acting?
So my degree was a logical end to education.
Same, yeah.
I wanted that BSc, but that was as far as it was going.
Yeah.
So I've always been relatively academic. It's that old cliche. It's horrible, but I've always been in the top form in everything, top set in everything, and push myself academically to do that every time. I wasn't straight A's by any means. I mean, got a lot of A's, but so from that perspective, it was a case of, right, I need to see education out, get this degree, and know what I'm doing elsewhere as well. I was coaching at the time, and working as much as I could. So I was doing a bit of everything, and yeah, it allowed me to draw a line under a part of my life as well, because education is a wonderful tool, and I recommend it to everyone. I think everyone should have access to it. It's 100% the right of anyone to be educated or to have access to education at any point in their life. But I think for me, it was a case of, I knew where I wanted to stop with it. Otherwise, I would have gone down that rabbit hole of master's, doctorate, and then I'd never have come out again. Whereas it wasn't a case of that I had to jump into work, but I knew that I'd done enough with education to now take that next step.
What was the degree in, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it was at Brunel, and it was sports science, sports science and biomechanics.
Cool. Yeah, no, there's so many things I could ask you about that, but okay. The first thing I want to say is, like, I completely get where you're coming from on that, because I had the same thing when I studied my degree. Like, I did it because I was interested in marketing, and I thought, oh, this is logical. It was a management with marketing degree from Royal Holloway University. And I was like, okay, great. This will help me get a job. That was why I did it. Right. And then I realized that, as you said, there's this big kind of academic culture that's so far removed. It has like nothing to do with getting jobs. It's just this whole route you can follow that's purely based in, doing research, creating academic papers, trying to get grants. Yeah. And that's fair enough for people that are into that, but like, I had no idea about that beforehand going in. And like, I'll be honest, like, nothing against the university. I mean, Royal Holloway is very research based, so this is why it was like this. But my degree, it did not help me at all in terms of getting a job. It's great to just have the degree, but when I started working in marketing, I had to just learn from scratch, basically. And
I agree, and the degree is very much like a driving test. It's, here's how you get your BSc. You follow these things, you do these papers, you do these tests, and that's it. I personally, I've used little bits of physics, little bits of biology, and little bits of biomechanics, but I've never used it as a whole ever. Like, for biomechanics, for example, is great for fight scenes. So if we're faking like a movement or an arm break, whatever, or just how a movement across camera works, and how that, those sort of things, love it. But other things where it was like studying the coefficient of restitution, like, that's stuck in my head forever, and I know what it is, has zero relevance to anything.
That's how I feel about general school. Like, I wonder sometimes, like, why did they never just do a lesson on like taxes or money management or something? Like,
secondary school could do a lot more. I went to an all boys comprehensive, and it was targeted at the trades and traditional study. So you had bricklaying, woodwork, vehicle studies, those sort of things. And
see, those things are actually useful, though.
They are incredibly useful. But then it was like, okay, you do that, but where's your pathway? Where do you go? What do you do? And it's very much a case of education now needs to shift towards not what was required back in the day in terms of, okay, you go to school, but you're getting taught life skills elsewhere. A lot of life skills now need to be taught in education. I think that, I'm old enough to have been and done PHSE, and I remember those sort of things. And I remember nothing about those classes apart from the fact that it had no relevance to life skills at all.
Yeah.
Whereas, like you say, being taught about HMRC, tax, what self-employment means, what employment means, all those little things, those little subtle nuances would help so many kids coming out at 15, 16 years old. And even if they're not the most academic, at least they know how the world works.
Yep.
And that's far more important.
Yeah, because everyone's got a different way of learning and stuff, and like how they approach things. Like me, I was all right grades wise, it worked out in the end. But there was like particular areas where I was really good and other areas where I was terrible. So like I was excellent in English and business and like creative endeavors, which makes sense to me now because it's like those are all the things I do. But then I was terrible at maths, for example, just useless. And part of that was poor teaching, and part of that was just down to like how my mind works and stuff. But I think the resources that are available to you, the way it's taught, all of these things are like so important. And then just like the things in general that are useful in adult life. Like I feel like a lot of that you just end up learning the hard way, unfortunately.
Adult life after about 16, I think, is just one big blag. And it's an entire population with everyone pretending they know what the hell they're doing and no one does. It's just more people, if you excuse the phrase, it's just more people look like they've got their shit together than other people. That's all it is. And everyone goes home and has that same fear, anxiety, and loathing about everything because no one knows what they're doing. And just some people are stumbling slightly faster than other people.
Ain't that the truth? Just a really random left field question before we continue with your studies and stuff. You're from Uxbridge, is that right? Yeah, so I that's my neck of the woods as well, funnily enough. I was born in Hillingdon Hospital.
So was I.
Yeah. And lived all around there, so Uxbridge, Ruislip, all of these areas. Not like a big interesting thing, I guess, for anyone that's listening necessarily. But do you still live in that area? Because I was thinking about this. Okay,
perfect for me. It's near enough to Pinewood, Shepperton, Ealing, Leavesden, so it's perfect. And on top of that, literally get on the train at Ruislip, and I'm in Soho for castings.
And Heathrow as well. I never considered it because I figured like what I was going to ask you was like, you're around the world all the time and stuff. So you'd need to be living somewhere that's useful to do all of that. And I suppose, like living in Hillingdon is a great area in terms of that. Cause you got like Pinewood, Heathrow, as you said, Soho, all these different things. So it's fair play. Good on you. Anyway.
Now?
No, so I actually live in Manchester now, up north.
My condolences, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. No, I dig it. I dig the music scene here.
Manchester is lovely. I've had some great experiences in Manchester. It's a beautiful place.
It's just different. I spent 3 years abroad in Estonia. That's where I was living. And then I came back to England in February, and I was like, I was like, where do I? Yeah, I know, right? Literally, like, it's funny how things work out because I was at home for a week. I was around family and stuff, and I was like, right, I want to go somewhere different, do something different. So I went up north and went to Manchester, and basically had that kind of 1 week panic of like, what do I do? Where do I go? Like I was living in this awful hostel and just like, I can't find. And then I find a place, get settled, and then all of this stuff happens, and it's like, God damn, like, funny how the universe works.
And for me personally on that, as much as it can, the pandemic came at a perfect time for me. Not in terms of what it is, but in terms of what we've had to go through. I got back in the country start of March,
Oh
and
wow. Okay. Yeah. Same thing.
my timing was very fine. And what it was for me is I gave myself no excuse not to do things. And I mean, I got a massive whiteboard and I just started writing, and it was like everything I need to do
Mm-hmm.
and everything I've said I'm going to do. And like I got my bucket list out and I was like, what can I tick off on this as well? And what it was if I was never going to do it, or I had an excuse that I was using beforehand, like time, for example, if that was the case and now I have time,
Yep.
and I still don't do it, I was never going to do it. So it opened my eyes a little bit as well to that. Don't get wrong, I got a lot, like I sort of freshened up on a lot of skills that I was taking for granted, like a lot of my weapon skills. On top of that, I learned to skip because I was 32 years old and couldn't skip. So
It's harder than it looks.
Yeah. I was that
speed
guy.
skipping as well, which is what I imagine where you do the yeah.
Well, when I was in Mexico, I was taken to an MMA gym.
Cool.
And their warm up is half an hour of skipping. I was like, I can't do 30 seconds of skipping. So there was just this typical English guy in the corner of this hard as nails Mexican MMA gym, flailing with this rope. And I was like, yeah, never again. So yeah, that was like top of my list. And then like getting back to using nunchucks and
Oh wow, cool.
like all those sort of things. And it was perfect for me in terms of I've got no excuse not to do this stuff. I locked myself in the studio and recorded loads and loads of voiceover stuff. I got like 25 of my favorite adverts, wrote down the scripts from them, and then redid them and re-edited them.
What a good idea. Oh my god. Yeah.
So, I mean, it was one of those where I was like, I did a load of what I'm calling unbranded ones, where I made up fake brands and made a fake advert. But then I was like, can I hit the same standard as actual adverts? So the one that always stuck with me, and it's stuck with me forever, is the Guinness Surfer advert. It's black and white, and it's this northern guy, proper thick Yorkshire accent, and he's talking over these Hawaiian surfers, and then the waves come over, and it's horses coming over. And I was like, right, I'm gonna do that advert. And so did that, and then some British Airways stuff, the Duracell bunny, all those sort of things. And that was the challenge for me, was like, this advert is already good. This is a fantastic advert, but can I live up to that standard? So I did that. And then I'm currently working through all my impressions and impersonations, and
cool.
Done a long list of that as well.
What's your best one so far at the moment?
My Gollum is pretty good.
Give us a quick Gollum.
No, the hobbits are our friends. They don't want to touch the precious.
That was good.
Yeah, then like, you see, the thing is, my Jack Sparrow is actually quite good as well. So like little things. But it was one of those where I was like, I love Charlie Hopkinson, who does all the voiceover stuff.
Yeah.
He incredible talent. So I'm the guy that will just watch YouTube and go, oh Christ, I've got so much to do. But it's been great because I've had a load of voiceover work and stuff where even simple things like doing an American accent, like little things, and it should be quite easy for an Englishman to do an American accent.
It's not. It's not. No, I've been working on it myself, and it's like, because like most people go straight for the Southern drawl or like American surfer or something like that. But actually, like trying to, get like particular.
Mine's Midwest.
Cool.
I can drop straight into a Midwest quite easy. So my American accent, I can just drop into it. It sits there. It's really nice. And but like the Californian stuff really easy, and the Southern drawl, the Texan, and I need to get a New York accent, and
Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard.
It's just that one that does a stick, you know.
That's the one I'm trying to work on. I'm trying to do that one because it's like, so you don't want to go too cliche with it, but at the same time you kind of need to get the right.
Yeah, you don't want to be like 1960s gangster, but you don't want to be like full Bronx accent either. It's a very fine line to be tread. So that's on the list of ones that I need to work on. I did this truly abhorrent self-tape with a Birmingham accent, and I was like, I'm gonna have to go and apologize to a city. Like that's how bad this accent was. So sometimes it works really well, and other times your eyes are open to like, oh crap, I've got way more to do. But yeah,
I think it really depends. I mean, I think generally British actors, we're better at doing American accents than Americans are at doing English. Like I can think of so many examples of English actors that nail it, but the reverse, not so much. But then I can also, you know, like I remember we were talking about Jason Statham earlier. I remember hearing him do one particular movie where he does an American accent, and I was so disappointed. I was like, here's this guy who's fantastic, but this particular accent right now is
Jason is one of the, if it wasn't for him and Transporter, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. My end goal is to, as I say end goal like there's an end. My goal is to be the best possible blend of Jason Statham and Gary Oldman.
Ooh, yeah.
Sort of, whatever that would come out looking like, that's where I want to be. Because with Gary Oldman, a lot of the time you're watching a film and it's not until like 45 minutes in you go, oh fuck, that's Gary Oldman. And then, I mean, even stuff where there's no makeup involved or anything like that, but watching Batman, you go, that's Gary Oldman. And I had to go back and watch all his old stuff, and I'm having a brain fart, but where he plays Drexel Spivey, and things where he's got this really cool Jamaican American accent thing going on, playing this drug runner, and it's like, this is a very British actor doing this.
Yeah,
it's incredible. Even down to Hitman's Bodyguard, where
great movie, by the way. I love that movie.
Love it. Hilarious, absolutely love it. So from that side of things, it was a case of I wanted to make sure that when it comes to a performance and someone changes something on the spot, at least you've got your toolbox where you can go and pull an accent out and be able to at least cover it. And a lot of it comes from the impressions side of it. So I'm using my Joker impression to work on my New York accent, for example, because Heath Ledger used a sort of Manhattan accent for his, that sort of Tom Waits sort of voice. So I'm using that without making it sound too Joker. So there was a More Than Insurance advert ages ago where they did a fantastic Morgan Freeman impression.
I remember
so I've been
that.
using that advert to do my Morgan Freeman. So yeah, like it's finding all those little tricks that work for you, and if they work, then I'm happy to admit where I got them from. You know.
Yeah, it is interesting, like how because I feel like certain actors nail it, other ones, even if they're the best, like I said, like Jason Statham is a fantastic actor, but I think that like impressions were all like accents wise, maybe it's not his strong suit. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like that accents in general is something that you have to work really, really hard at. And like it takes time. Like me with the American accent, when I look back at like older videos that I've done and the newer ones, it's much more comfortable because I've taken a lot of time to get into it and stuff. And I feel like, you know, you were talking about like instances where certain things help you get into it, like a particular character or something like that. For me, it's like situations. Like I love playing bad guys for some reason. And it's really easy for me to do like intense, scary, like psychopath American accent. That's just really easy for some reason. But just doing a regular everyday accent, is really difficult for some reason for me.
Yeah,
So it's, I guess it's just one of those things you have
yeah.
to just
A
work
lot of
out.
the time with that, and like, it's finding the little rules that make things work. And so, like, I was talking with a friend the other day about the Afrikaans accent, and it with Afrikaans, it's just the case that all the vowels are wrong.
Yep.
And so, like, O is E, A is I, and so on and so on. So when you get those rules right, the accent sort of comes out on its own. But like you said, with the New York accent, it's getting those rules right in the first place. Because one word wrong, it sounds off.
It's even trickier when you speak another language as well. Like when I lived in Estonia, I learned Estonian, and I basically had to forget English, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. Like it's just almost like I liken it to like plugging your head out of the matrix and then replugging it back into a different port.
yeah, yeah.
But like the accent came, and a lot of the time people had no idea that I was English, and it
That's
was.
cool.
But that took time and effort, and I had to do a similar thing that you did. I had to learn their extra letters. Like for instance, E is like air. It's totally different. It's like,
Yeah,
and then I is E, and it's like what?
yeah, exactly that.
But you got to do it. Got to be done. Anyway, yeah, let's move it forward. Just bring it real quick back to your studies. Like I wanted to ask you about your degree because I figured it was in something different. But in terms of your acting studies, you studied at the Actors Temple Studio in London, which labels itself as an alternative to drama school. So why did you decide to study at this particular one instead of drama school? Like, what was the reasoning behind that decision?
I ducked in and out. So Actors Temple was like, I ducked in and out of them because I was following Tom
Okay.
Radcliffe, and it was a case of I find what works at the time, and for me, traditional education, being sat in a classroom or sat in a room,
Yeah.
wasn't the most conducive thing for me. Whereas being sat in a workshop where it's just constant performance, perfect. It didn't have to be my performance, but it was able to break down a performance. So I think it was a case of I don't fit very well with the traditional education model. It's something that I got bored of, and so I just sought out places where I didn't have to do that. And it was important for me to be in places where there was an emphasis on Meisner. That was important because from that perspective, it was something that I knew worked and that I knew I could study. And even if I wasn't using the whole thing and I wasn't using the entire spectrum of that method, I was able to at least pull the bits down that I wanted and strengthen them. And most of the time, it is just using rep and the imaginary circumstance a lot of the time. And with those, that covers a plethora of sins, and it gets you, it allows you to help other people as well, because you can pull them out of their head where they've been trying to make something work, and it's not pulling out. And then you just say one thing to them: look, what would you say if you were angry to me? Or what would you say if you were going to make me laugh? And that changes their thought process. Instead of the character saying the words, it's just tidying that up. So yeah, for me, it was avoiding traditional education, finding something that was vocational and worked for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think particularly as well, just on that final point you were making, like I love it when you have a director that's like really like lenient, well not lenient, but like that allows you to ad lib. I find
Yeah.
that really works. Like assuming that the character doesn't have like a very specific way of talking, in terms of words, then if something just naturally feels easier for you to say in a particular way, and the director's cool with it, it makes the whole process easier. I don't know.
Yeah, I've only ever had a falling out once because I didn't hit my triggers. I was working with one particular actress, and this is 7 years ago. I've been doing this far too long. Yeah, so I was getting the essence of the story. I was delivering the lines, but I was delivering the lines how I thought they would be said.
Right.
But it was throwing her off. because I wasn't hitting my last word.
Mm-hmm.
And so she had learned the script verbatim. And that was it, and that's what she was going to do. So yeah, she got very angry with me, shall we say?
See, that's the problem as well. Like I learn the scripts as much as I can verbatim, but like I do think that you just can't be like that. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I feel like, without sounding too cliche, but like magic happens if you kind of just, like, for instance, if there's a fuck up and you both just roll with it and ad lib, like, okay, this is a bit different, but like I'm a big fan of professional wrestling, right? And in professional wrestling, they often...
Yep, the golden era was the best, by the way. It's kind of dead now.
I disagree, but fair play. But like, no, in terms of like how it applies to acting and such, it's interesting because some promotions, some eras, you know, they decide to just have scripting only, and other times no script, they just have like bullet points essentially, like, you know, if the scene is A to Z, and we've got to hit like, you know, C, D, F, and then Z, then what happens in between, as so long as it's logical and it gets us to our destination, it's fine. And like, so if there is a fuck up, you just find a way to navigate to get to the next point.
It's a dangerous way of being. If you look at like when Booker T would cut a promo, for example, Booker T had a monumental slip up, and you see him not just mess up, but he drops kayfabe straight away, and it pulls you out of the entire thing. The same if CM Punk, when he did the pipe bomb, cutting a promo like that, which is essentially career suicide. Other things where Dwayne Johnson and John Cena, where they were cutting promos at each other and they weren't scripted. And the problem is that they were cutting promos about what was going on in their real lives. And that got toxic. So I especially in terms of wrestling and in terms of where you can and can't go, if there's a certain prescribed way of doing things, there's a lot of safety to that. And yeah, the little ad-libs and the little bits of improv are great, but if you go too far, there's that risk that you sort of either disengage the audience, which with Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and Kevin Nash in 89. This is before the screw job, where all four of them broke kayfabe after a cage match.
94 in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, and it's that for me is in front of 30,000 people, and you're dropping kayfabe, and you know that when wrestling was super prescribed, that was incredibly dangerous. And the Manhattan screw job with Bret Hart, where changing the storyline on the spot, and the whole thing with Shawn Michaels, those sort of things with wrestling. I mean, it's a perfect example because it is borderline improv a lot of the time. Those things really do change a lot of the perception of the product. And that's why a lot of love was lost for the WWE before it became just World Wrestling.
But in fairness, like, you know, Vince McMahon, I mean, the business had already, people knew that it was fixed. Yeah, people knew the fix was in. They were always known. But he publicly, in order to avoid tax and rebrand his company as sports entertainment and not professional wrestling, so he could avoid various laws and different taxes and different things, he said that publicly, that yeah, it's not real. And you know, regardless of what you think of that, you know, ever since then the business has just changed and developed to the point where, yeah, okay, you gave those examples of those promos where, you know, maybe those performers went too far, but like in today's era, everyone, like the fans are like, you know, really smart to it. They know everything, blah, blah, blah. So you've got to have like, I realize for those who don't know about wrestling, this is probably going to go over their heads, but I don't know. I'm just going to keep rolling with it. Since you know about wrestling, I know we can keep going. You know, they have those work promos, or shoot promos, I should say, or shoot work shoot, they call it. So yeah, you tell them like 60% truth and then 30% lie, and you wave into the lie. and then you leave your audience guessing as to what's real and what isn't. And I think like, so long as it's like strategically done and the story is the main thing, like, and this is kind of why I brought this up in the first place. Like, I think the story has to always be your focal point. If you are someone who's a bit egotistical and selfish, and you're just thinking like, oh, how can I pop the audience or something, then yeah, you're going to fuck it up and ruin the story. But if you're focused on the story, you drop a bit of fun here and there, but ultimately you're focused on getting to that Z point, you know, selling the pay-per-view, selling the match, selling the story. It'll work every time.
I think natural performers that can cut promos will always deliver something that is crowd pleasing, if not necessarily the best. So Dwayne Johnson, for example, he's never cut a bad promo, and
Never.
From the stuff from the start of the Attitude Era, where The Rock became like the second babyface after Steve Austin, and the whole sort of thing where you had two. Steve Austin should never have been a babyface, but it was the fact that they tailored it that way. He was like the perfect heel that was made the perfect face.
He was undeniable. If you become popular enough as a heel, people just love you. And the difference with Austin was that he was just himself. He was just like a man's man. That was his character, and largely him in real life as well. So it's like, how can you hate a guy who's just a badass and just does whatever the hell he wants? Like, that just resonates with people.
That's what I mean. You gave those people the platform to do that. The Rock, John Cena, Steve Austin, Triple H. Triple H has only ever cut one bad promo ever, and that was with him.
But go on.
No. In terms of like iconic like car crash, it was him and Shawn Michaels during the Generation X. That promo they cut that was borderline career suicide, where they're in the back of the Jeep and they go to the WCW headquarters. That was bad.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas Dwayne Johnson, you can't name a bad promo. Every time he returns to World Wrestling, it's always award-winning promo.
He had to like start somewhere though. Don't forget, like when he started, he was a babyface, and yeah, he was being told what to do. But those first initial babyface promos were lackluster.
The way that Rocky Maivia was put over is the most natural thing I've ever. He didn't know he was winning that fight until literally going up to the ring walk, and the fact that he had no kayfabe the entire time that he was in that fight and that match. Even when he was pinning to win, he was thanking the whole time. He was like, "Thank you so much, thank you, I'm being put over," and those sort of things. And it's the same with John Cena. John Cena has cut completely improvised promo where it's just about mental health and pushing forward and dealing with depression and all those sort of stuff. And it's just on brand and it works.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I say, it is the perfect industry for where improv can work without necessarily worrying about triggers.
Thanks for allowing that little bit of a tangent there. It's fun.
Geeking out with a bit of world wrestling.
What would you say are the key differences sort of between working on small sets for, say, like short films or just smaller general sets versus working on like major Hollywood sets?
Pressure. And not necessarily the way you think. Every project's different. For the most part, the smaller set is easier to control and the pressure isn't as high. Although it goes sideways a lot quicker on a smaller set. So that would be a big thing. The obvious stuff that I won't touch on too much is money, equipment, resources. Those are obvious. The more subtle things are access to the professionals, I would say, because that can make or break an entire project. And that would be the biggest difference, I would say, from being on a small, intimate set, like a short film, as opposed to a 500 grand a day film. Those sort of things are very different. So the access to who you're working with, you do luck out. And there are a lot of burgeoning young independent people working in film that are awesome. They are fantastic. It's the ones that are cutting the corners that sort of doesn't work. So yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest difference.
Awesome. And what would you consider as your kind of like greatest triumphs in your acting career so far?
Have I had any? Uh, I think just the fact that it's moving in the right direction is the biggest triumph, really. Because, like I said earlier, things can go sideways so quickly, and it can be nothing to do with you at all. And you could be doing everything right, and it still go wrong. So the fact that I'm in 1/2 professions that are very dear to me, the fact that I get to go to incredible locations. I mean, I count all the studios in that. Where was I? I was in Stoke Poges this week, just gone, filming on a TV series for Discovery, and the creativity that goes into film sets is incredible. So it reminded me of the Gillette building in Chiswick, where Sky do a lot of stuff.
Is it?
And the 24 series and stuff like that.
I used to work there, by the way. That's why I went.
And Stoke Court in Stoke Poges, that is his old manor house, but they've converted it into a working film studio.
Oh, wow.
And every room is a different set, and they've got big rooms where they can put blanks up and make corridors and all this sort of stuff. And I geeked out. I completely geeked out. And that for me was part of the. I literally, we finished the scene. We discovered a body, and I was chatting with the director, and I went, "What's the rest of this place like?" And he went, "We've got some time." And that's the amazing thing. You can be at work and be shown this whole new avenue. And we went around. There was like an old lab, like Resident Evil lab setup.
Oh, wow, cool.
Like a 1970s hunters studio with loads of stuffed animals on the walls. There was this MMA basement area where like they've done faux rust gates and like a torture chamber, and all of them was in this one mansion house. And so that for me is one of the greatest things about this industry and doing this job, is the fact that you can go to these incredible places, and to the outside that's just a manor house that probably doesn't get used much, but to the inside, the sort of the creativity that goes on is amazing.
Ah, that does sound like an incredible place. I would geek out in a situation like that. Wow. Yeah, I just want to ask you a couple of final questions on your acting, just before we sort of move on to your role as a producer. To any sort of aspiring actors, what are the main tips that you have for them in terms of just pursuing a career in acting?
Okay. In no particular order, you got to know your stuff. You can't be half-hearted. It's never going to work. That would be the first thing. Embrace the hustle. Know that you're going to have to work longer hours than you've ever worked. Put in more effort than anyone else is going to put in, and know that it's going to take a long time. 10 years to be an overnight success. And what else? Find what you love. Whether that be short film, whether that be TV, whether that be whatever, festival pieces, whatever it is, voiceover. As long as you have got that passion behind it, you 100% will do it. But don't force it. Those would be the main things. Acting, like we said at the very start, you can't be a square peg in a round hole. It will eat away at you. So yeah, embrace the hustle would be the number one though.
Thank you for sharing that. Right, so let's move on. Let's talk about your career as a producer. Now, you're currently working on an upcoming documentary movie named The Beast When Eddie Met Arnie. And for those who don't know, this is the famous powerlifter. I believe he's the world's strongest man, or was the world's strongest man, Eddie Hall, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, which, I mean, this just blows your mind just thinking about these two names in this same place. Talk to me a little bit about how you landed this particular project and what the experience has been like so far, because I understand you're still working on it. I saw that there was a potential release date of like October this year, but then there's other sources that say it's sometime in 2021. So it's kind of all a bit confusing, but I understand that, there's a lot in terms of like production, post-production and so on. So talk to us a little bit about this experience.
Yeah, I'm super indebted to my business partner, Winston Ellis. So I started working with Winston over 2 years ago now. And I produced Winter Ridge with Dom Lenoir, Matt Hookings, and a couple of other guys. Stepped away from that before production because I was moving on to other stuff. And then I had so many projects where I was like, I can produce this, and I can produce this, I can produce this. And I sat down with Winston, and we got on really well. And he sort of has shown me the way that production is done right. And for me, that was a turning point. So with myself and Winston, we've got Razor Edge Films, and that's our production company that is pushing this forward. We're working with Geredo Universe and a couple of other production companies as well. And the real it came about from one meeting to discuss what this project could be. So Winston was brought in as executive producer and was gave it a lot more scope in terms of what it could be as a project. And it started out a lot smaller. It was one man's journey, and it was, how do you follow in your icon, hero, mentor's footsteps? It's got a lot bigger since then. So that was like the burgeoning point of it, because Eddie, absolutely wonderful guy, truly salt of the earth, humble, lovely guy, devoted his life to this 500 kilo deadlift and to be the world's strongest man. And he promised his nan on her deathbed that that's what he was going to do. And that sort of thing is incredibly powerful. So Winston brought in a fantastic director, Chris Fratwell. And the idea is how do we show that there are parallels between what Eddie has done and where Eddie is and what Arnold did? So our parallels started off straight away with Mr. Olympia, and Arnold being at the top of his game, and then deciding to go to New York. And everyone was a naysayer to Arnold. You're not American. You're a power lifter. You're a bodybuilder. You're not. And that was it. That was where Arnold flipped it on its head. And you've got Hercules in New York, where you've got this huge Austrian guy playing Hercules, and that's been like a pivotal point for not just Arnold, but if you look at Jason Statham, former Olympic diver, Dolph Lundgren, Terry Crews, Jet Li, Carl Weathers. The list is endless, and oddly enough, there are a lot of actors that I love their work. So we drew all these parallels, and then it was a case of how do we show the impact that Arnold's had and how that affects someone who's already at the top of their game. But what happens when their top of their game is now the starting block again? And so that's been incredibly important, because like I said earlier, everyone's second job is entertainment. Everyone's second job is, I can present, or I can TikTok, or I can YouTube, or whatever it might be. But it's how do you make a success of that? And so that's what we're discussing, and that's the crux of the documentary, is that professional movement. And then the drama side of it is...
Can I just press you on that real quick? So if I understood the blurb correctly, because I read this on IDMB, Eddie Hall wants to pursue acting as well. So he literally wants to fully in the footsteps of Arnold Schwarzenegger.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify that.
And then, so because it's a docudrama, we've got some recreations, and the turning point for Eddie in terms of Arnold being the icon, the hero, was Terminator 2, and
Yes,
it is for a lot of us. It's iconic. So we recreated that with Eddie in a bar in Stoke. It's absolutely fantastic. Eddie did an incredible job. So did all the stunt guys. The way Chris broke down the scene to have Eddie hit those beats as the Terminator, and we didn't need an Austrian accent or anything like that. It was Eddie being the Terminator as Eddie Hall, and those sort of things really sort of draw your attention to the fact that everyone has those universal experiences, those universal moments that we can all say, that was when I discovered Schwarzenegger, or that was when I discovered action films or horror, or because I mean Terminator fundamentally is a horror film. The first two, it's the oncoming monster, it's the monster in the dark, especially the first Terminator. So yeah, that the beast as a whole, and where I sort of came in is the team was built and the team was ready to go, and it was looking at the creative direction. It was looking, and the team that are involved in this are all incredible. They're leaders in their game. Chris Fretwell is an awesome director. We've got a fantastic DOP. We've got some great documentary shooters as well that have all done awesome work. The documentary shooter that we're working with has captured some incredible content, and it's really sort of touching, heartwarming stuff that he's captured, which is, I mean, it can only benefit. I mean, there's a lot more going on with this project at the moment, and COVID has kind of helped in that sense, because we've analysed where it is, what it could be, and how big it could be. There's a big thing about mental health, which is incredibly important with this. Eddie struggled with mental health. There's a fantastic documentary that he is on YouTube where he talks about that. But Arnold is a huge advocate for mental health and what you can do to develop and progress. Dwayne Johnson, John Cena, Dolph Lundgren, they all talk about it. Terry Crews talks about it. All these ex-sports stars that are trying to show that you don't have to be the alpha male. You don't have to be, it's okay to not be okay in that sense. So yeah, where I came in is sort of to assist with the direction that we were going in, and working closely with all the different departments. So yeah, it's been an awesome experience for me. I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into fiction now. That's something where it's like, okay, I want to create a world now, and sort of sit down with a director and do that. But yeah, producing was one of those things where, like I said earlier, it's knowing other people's jobs, knowing what other people do, and then appreciating them for it and letting them do it. That's the job of a producer, is to keep an eye on the numbers, keep an eye on the people. And if you can do that and you can follow your gut, then that's how you develop a project as a whole. And that's something that's been drilled into me by Winston a lot, which is, again, something that I'm very grateful for as well.
Yeah, and like from what I understand, like you mentioned, obviously the movie that you worked on back in 2018, which was Winter Ridge, and from what I understand, you worked as a assistant producer, and ever since then you've been taking on various assistant producer roles, and then this was like your first one as a just full-on producer. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean the whole thing with like producers as a whole, and what one person brings will make them ex-producer. What someone else brings. With Winter Ridge, I was operating as like an associate producer. I was bringing different people in and lining up stuff. Like worked with some of the product placement for it and things like that. Helped develop the script. So being a producer is what what elements you might bring. So like an exec might bring the money or might bring the talent. A producer might be bringing the logistical side or going over the budgets. And so, yeah, it's for me, I had no bones or ego about the fact that as much as I read about and know the industry, I was happy to relearn a load of it and to appreciate again what goes into so many other departments and the hard work. I mean, the AD department, I would go grey very quick working as an AD. They do a fantastic job. And line producers, they've got to be borderline savants to understand what things cost and when they're going to cost and this is going to happen. And I could try and break down a budget. I really could. But then a line producer will go, but what about this, and this, and they'll go into like, and it's the plethora of things that you don't see.
Yeah.
Being a producer, you developed a whole new appreciation for the level of talent, skill, and professionalism that people in the industry have. And watching the execs, so I took a step back on one of the shooting days and I watched the stunt coordinator, Ray Nicholas, an absolutely incredible stunt coordinator, Winston, who was the exec, and the director. And I took a step back and I watched them and the way they ran the set and the way they spoke to people and the way they brought everything together. And like I said, it was like a living, breathing being and really high intensity sequence. There was a stunt on the day. There was a lot of moving parts. We had fire thing, lots of stuff. I can't say what it is because it's going to be a great part of the film. But watching them do that, again, you sort of take that step back and you're like, all right, that's where I've got to be. That's what I've got to do. And then you go back in and then you're back running a film set and you're like, yeah, we've got to do this, we've got to do this, we've got to do this. I've just seen them do that, so I know that we can do this. Simple things like I'm a big fan of anyone who's a second unit director because I think that's the real nitty gritty. Like first unit gets all the fun and glory, and then second unit, go and do all of that. You've got 3 minutes, and like so those sort of things. And looking at the specialist parts of stuff. So I've got a huge passion for action. I have done since I was about 4 years old. So like, I mean, my two of my favorite films are Terminator 2 and Alien 2, and for the action sequences, really. And that sort of stuck with me, and it was only now with like the advent of social media and the open access that you get from YouTube that you see what went in to getting those iconic things that you and I probably growing up would take for granted as, oh, it was just a film. But the amount of effort that went into making Aliens is astonishing. And that's one of my favorite horror / action films of all time. And the same with Terminator 2. Little things like using twins for some of the sequences. So the bit in the foundry where Sarah Connor appears, and it's
a twin sister,
and using the puppet of Arnold's head as Arnold, and Arnold plays the mirror, like very incredible stuff. But if it wasn't for open access and YouTube and things like that, you would never see it. And it's those things, that creativity of the industry, that keeps reigniting. I sound like a total geek, but it reignites my interest each time with that, because it's like, so that's how that gets done. That's how I can add it to this, and that's how we can do this.
I've got to say, I've never understood the issue with when people have an issue with being a geek or being knowledgeable about something. Like, because
I have no issue with it. I am a self-proclaimed geek nerd. I have to be. It's
cool. It's cool to be a geek, but like, it's not just about like interests though. Like, I guess the bigger thing is being like, having like a thirst for knowledge, having like a thirst for learning as much as you can in all areas. And like you said, kind of understanding all of the different areas and parts that go into producing a movie or a TV show or a documentary. Because like understanding the whole helps you understand the intricate parts within better as well. you know, and
Yeah, exactly that.
why wouldn't you want to know that? Like, I don't know. It confuses me when people get to a point where they're just like, yeah, you know, I know everything in this area. I'm fine. I'm done learning. Like, what?
That's one thing you'll never be done with.
Exactly. Yeah. What have been sort of the biggest challenges with this project so far?
So, because it's docudrama, some at certain points you're beholden to people and their schedules, because that's in the inherent part of a documentary is you catch people when they're being themselves. So scheduling, always a problem, always 100% a problem. The other things was the reality of the situations. So as much as we wanted to do drama, we didn't want to do drama for the sake of it. We wanted drama to have weight. So we had a fantastic young actor come in, a lad called Alex Needham, and he's playing Eddie from the ages of 16 to 19. And
I see. When you say docudrama, so that you're just going to have some scenes in it that are like pure,
yeah.
okay,
We
reenactments.
recreated some iconic beats from Eddie's life, and Alex brings that 19-year-old Eddie back to life in a way that we weren't expecting that sort of level. The drama is next level in terms of the quality, and it's heart-wrenching stuff, and it's the sort of thing where the people on the set were uncomfortable with how good it was, and that was, you know, so that was something that was hard, because we, like I say, it had to have weight, it had to have meaning, and it had to have relevance. If it didn't, then we were wasting our time. So that's been incredibly hard. I'm actively not going to touch on COVID, because that's an everyone issue.
Can I ask you one question with that though? And has that been responsible for the pushback of the release date of the movie?
Yeah, we can't get to certain places. We can't get to California at the moment, and or Ohio, and so with that, it's a case of when travel restrictions ease up, we get back on it. So yeah, that's been the key thing for us. Is this is a vehicle not just to tell a story about one man. This is much bigger than that. It's about the trials and tribulations you have to go through to be successful. It's transitioned from being the elite of any particular sport or the elite of any industry, and what do you do next? Or what happens when you decide to change that pathway? And then the mental health avenue is immense, because it's something that, yes, we are more open to talking about it, but it's something that until you see that A-lister star talking about it, until you see someone that you have seen in every action film talk about it, it's still going to have that that stigma, that taboo to it. So this will be a vehicle to have people not use that as an excuse not to talk about things. And everyone's been there to a greater or lesser extent, and I wouldn't say anyone's a liar that says they haven't done it, but they just didn't recognize it, I would say. So yeah, without sounding too serious, that's the real worthwhile meaning for the project, and that's the driving force behind it, is that this affects everyone. And as much as it's a story about the world's strongest man and the Terminator, it's not. It's far more socially relevant and culturally relevant than that.
It sounds incredible, I must say. Like, obviously, just reading the blurb on IDMB doesn't really convey exactly what you're conveying right now. It definitely seems much deeper. But so, it sounds fascinating, and particularly with you explaining sort of the parallels between Eddie Hall and Arnold Schwarzenegger, it kind of goes together quite nicely. It's quite logical in terms of storytelling, and makes it more even interesting that it's a pure documentary as well. It's not just like a fiction, but it's like a real thing that people can relate to and believe in. And I think we always need stuff like that in the world, really, don't we?
We had to make Eddie accessible, and
right.
Because being the world's strongest man, sometimes that's almost a deterrent. That's almost like how do I relate to someone who's elite and strong? But Eddie's he's very personable. He's a fantastic guy. So it was very much making sure that we could actually show that. But what we did is we took his past and we recreate it. We showed this is what Eddie's gone through. This is where, and people will relate to that. People will relate to the loss of a loved one, the change of career, all those sort of things, difficult childhoods, all those different facets of Eddie's life. So that was, again, like something that is a different string to the bow of this film.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. I really do appreciate it. And I'm sure all of our listeners are very excited about that and will appreciate that too. In terms of like the release date, I know it's impossible to say for sure, but do you reckon we can expect this at the latter end of this year, or is it more likely that 2021 is going to be kind of when it hits?
I mean, we're at the behest of the exec producers with that one, but it's very much because they'll know based on talking to distributors, and the nitty gritty of that will be when is the best time to release it more than anything else. Okay. So I would imagine it'll be 2021, and it'll. I mean, how long's a piece of string? But yeah, I mean, I would imagine April, May 2021. I think
it's just interesting to me because, you know, like obviously with Tenet coming out, you know, it was delayed quite a lot, and I found it very interesting that they chose to push it and release it now as opposed to, you know, say later when restrictions you know, less, I don't know what the word would be, strict, shall we say, or, you know, it's much easier. I mean, it's not impossible for people to go to movie theaters now, but it's not maybe the best time.
I think the way Tenet was explained to me is it's an art house film with an action film budget, and with that in mind, I think they're going on the idea that it will spend longer in the cinema. Would be my stab in the dark about that, because not everyone can do what Bond is doing and just keep moving it and moving it and moving it. But Bond's got to make back the best of 200 million, so that's the difference. Whereas I think Tenet is something like 60 or 75. So
that's interesting because I heard the budget was way higher than that. I remember there were whispers on set, but I guess so. It's actually lower then. That's interesting.
I thought it was around 75, but I'm happy to be wrong. You know.
Fair enough. Because I'd heard that he'd spent this is Christopher Nolan, upwards of about 200 million on The Dark Knight, I believe. I could be wrong on that. And I was hearing that the budget was approaching that kind of region. It was like 150, something like that.
I mean, that works both ways. I mean, if it is like a $200 million film, then getting it in the cinema and getting it ticking over it'll be interesting to see Tenet and No Time to Die, and seeing what strategy worked better. Whether being in the cinema longer but with less people, or waiting and restrictions being lifted, which one will make a difference.
I'm really interested in that too. Like in terms of, because I kind of had this feeling that like them releasing Tenet now might be detrimental. I mean, I know there's a massive buzz. People are really excited about this movie and stuff, and you know that there is that element to it, but given what's going on in the world, it does kind of make you wonder from the business standpoint, like, is it the best time? Is it better to wait? What's better for, you know, because I'd heard whispers that like it wasn't even necessarily up to Nolan himself. It might have been up to the, I don't want to say, or Paramount Studios, whoever distributes the movie or something like that. Like maybe they're behind that decision and they're pushing it. Because I've heard that typically the director has like the final say on like, this is when it's going to be released and so on and so forth. I mean, I know nothing about it. I'm just
when it comes to that, there are specialists in marketing departments, and no one knows better than the studio of when they're going to release something. Very rarely now do you get a film that is distributed wrong. I think the last one that I saw that was distributed wrong was Shia LaBeouf's PTSD film that made like 15 quid on a 60 million budget.
Oh, wow.
But like, yeah, but that again, that's an exception to the rule. There are so many people that their entire job is to check when to release, when's best for an action film release, when's best for a horror, you know. So I would be very surprised if there isn't a very strong strategy behind why they've released it now, as opposed to, let's say, 3 months, 4 months.
Thank you. Bringing it back to you, I'm wondering, given that you've had this like now first outing as a full-on film producer with this massive project, are you going to be continuing to pursue acting, or are you considering maybe more of a permanent move into a career as a film producer? Like, where's kind of your head at in regards to these two particular pathways? Because I guess they're still in the same industry, but they can lead you in different directions. So like, where does that leave you?
For me, I would say they are going to run parallel. I haven't done enough acting to ever say I'm done.
Right.
I'm sure when I'm old, they'll still need old characters and old actors, so I'll still be doing that. I mean, Jack Nicholson, Danny DeVito, and Morgan Freeman are still doing it, so there won't be an excuse. So no, they're going to run parallel, and the ideal scenario obviously is to be producing stuff with Rezo in the project as well. So not that there'll be any sort of nepotism or anything like that, but still it'll be nice to find those roles that are in a film that I'm involved in the production of as well. So no, the easy answer is they'll go hand in hand.
Fair play. That's good to hear as well. I think it's one of those things like you got to keep pushing them and keep going for them. It's the same for me. I do a lot of different things, and it's more that I just have a lot of goals that I want to achieve, and I can't just pick one. It's just kind of like, I want to do music, I want to do acting, I want to do podcasting. It's like, I want to do all these things, and it's very kind of like, is there a way I can make it all work? And I don't know, there are various people I see that can make it work and do make it work. And then there are other people do you know what I mean? There's so many people saying different things. Like some people say, oh, you got to stick to your lane. You can't go outside of it, or, stick to, it's tricky. It's tricky. But anyway, yeah, great to hear.
I think if you pay attention to what other people do, you'll do what other people want to do. Yeah. And that, the main crux of it is finding what you're comfortable with, what your passion is, and sticking with that.
I always want to bring it back to your acting for a second, because name dropping, people are always going to get excited about this. You've been in various different major productions, such as we mentioned before, you were in Star Wars: The Force Awakens as a heavy gunner stormtrooper, which I imagine must have just been awesome. I saw some shots of it and I was just like, that just looks so fun. You were in Mission Impossible: Rogue Nation as a soldier, Kingsman: The Secret Service as an Arctic guard, and in King Arthur, my mistake, as a Legend of the Sword as a knight. So similar kind of acting roles as an extra. Talk to me a little bit about these experiences, how they compare to each other and such.
All of those were while I was working through British Action. So all of them are action-based roles. So it was because I've worked with firearms, because I've worked with swords, because I can take a bump, all those sort of things. So it was the phrase used to be special action. That phrase isn't used anymore. I think it's now changed to action performer. So it was because with British Action Academy, we had done various stuff with broadswords, battle axes, rapier, that sort of stuff. So playing a knight with Jaimon Honsu was awesome, and pretending to fight dragons and things like that. And then anything where it was action related, it was like I said, it was that logical process of tying in being in the film industry with doing stuff that was action related, and just keeping myself down that pathway as much as possible.
And yeah, you mentioned British Action. So the full name of the institution is the British Action Academy, where you're a instructor. So talk to us a little bit about exactly what it is that you instruct or teach, and sort of how you got into that in general.
So while I was adding strings to the bow, this is 4 or 5 years ago now, I found out about the British Action Academy, and this is while I was also sort of more pushing towards stunts as well. And British Action Academy, they offer a very succinct pathway of learning how to operate on a film set, how to perform action safely, how to portray characters, and it's a very steep learning curve with them. They're an awesome organization that's run by Andreas Petridis, who's a fantastic stunt coordinator and performer. And it gives you the necessary tools to work on any number of performances in an action capacity, and also as an actor. It allows you that understanding of how to work with weapon systems, how to convincingly be in an action sequence, and also how to add a character to a performance. There are 4 levels to it. There's phase one, which is just like that's your introduction. That's your learning unarmed, basic weapon systems, basic routines. Then your phase 2, where those routines become far more intense and you start working with groups of performers. By the time you get to phase 3, you start adding characters to those. So if you're working with a broadsword, you've got to add a knight to your performance. So you're now a knight of the realm, and you've got to move like you're in full suit of armor. You've got to hit that. The same with pirate. And it's not that hack and slash Pirates of the Caribbean. It's former buccaneers that were skilled swordsmen. So it's very delicate rapier movements. So all these things work you towards phase 4. And phase 4 is the final level, the elite level, and that's 5 weapon systems. It's a test or fail. It's a pass or fail test, and that's Jason Bourne level unarmed fighting. There is a dagger involved with that. Then you've got ninja performance with katanas, wakasashis, and nunchucks. Viking with a huge battle axe, and then you've got a spear routine with playing a Greek. So all these different routines have to have a character, they have to have believability, and like I say, it's pass-fail. So there's an incredible level of dedication that has to go into it in order to get to that level. Then I've sort of moved on to instructing, and there's 3 levels of instruction as well. So I sit around the 2nd level with that, and that's very much I've been through it, and I wanted to help other people go through it as well. And also it reinforces your learning, it reinforces what you do, and it forces you to keep your skills sharp as well, if you excuse the pun. And so from that side of things, it was logical to sort of carry on and instruct as well as perform.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate it. You're also a trained martial artist. You won and I'm sorry if I messed this up, an IMAF black belt in PKA kickboxing. And you also have experience in judo and Krav Maga. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. So my parents got me into judo when I was young. My parents are absolutely awesome. Gave me a fantastic childhood, brought me up the right way. They're amazing people, and they made sure that I was involved in a plethora of sports, and judo was one of them, along with rugby, football, swimming, diving, you name it. And so martial arts has to a greater or lesser extent had some sort of involvement throughout my entire life. Judo fell away when I was doing more sort of rugby and football. I picked up Krav Maga as like a self-defense thing, because it's all about defense and dealing with assailants. And then when I started getting more into film, I needed something that translated effectively to screen, and that's where kickboxing comes in. I was very lucky. I met a guy called Dave Gentry who taught Scott Adkins, and from that it was a case of very fast progress and a lot of hard work. I got my PKA black belt up in Birmingham. That was like the first sort of big part of that, and that was a lot of knowing your routines, knowing your quality, knowing those sort of things. I mean, I have absolutely no bloodlust. I'll hold my hands up. I won't do a competitive fight. That's it's not in me to do that. I have a don't do any harm policy when it comes to things like that. Different on screen, but when it's real life. And then Dave awarded me my IMAF black belt as part of my progression towards when I'm doing my second Dan, which will be sort of towards the end of this year, starting next. Oh, so wow. Martial arts is sort of I regard myself as studying the martial arts. I know a lot of people who are fantastic martial artists that are way and beyond what I can achieve. Winston, for example, my business partner, he's 3 times world kickboxing champion. He's won the American Open, for example. Lots of friends in my sort of network, they're Taekwondo champions, BJJ champions, and it's just amazing to be around those people that again have reached the pinnacle of that of those sports.
And what would you say in general martial arts kind of means to you?
Martial arts to me was a test of my dedication, a test of my focus. It's always insightful to see what other people put themselves through, and especially when it comes to the martial arts as a whole is not just the throwing of a punch or a kick or the ability to take a hit. It's so much more than that. It's that dedication to a specific way of moving, a specific way of learning, and also a specific way of conducting yourself. And there's an old phrase: "The man who raises his fists in anger has already lost."
Yeah.
So it's that learning that willpower as well, and that discipline to know that you can do something, and that's the reason you don't do something. You know. So yeah, for me, I had a very selfish is the wrong word. I had a very single-minded mindset in terms of I needed kickboxing because I wanted the martial art to go into film.
Yeah.
And it was part of my action thing. It was part of developing and progressing and moving that way. So that was why it was helpful, and that's why, and like I say, huge respect to anyone who picks up a martial art.
Fair enough. Thanks for sharing. Let's move it forward and talk about your work as a public speaker and a presenter. Now, I think it's quite a logical move in terms of acting and stuff. You know, I've done similar stuff myself. I will say this though, before I sort of get into the question I have for you, that the approach is different. Like, you know, when you're doing, say, like adverts or you're representing a company or anything, like, yes, you are acting or you're employing the similar techniques, but at the same time, it's a completely different ball game, different approach, everything. How come you chose to get into this? Is it just like another form of work for you, like another avenue, or is there more of a, I don't want to say like a deeper level on it for you, but like let's say a particular interest in that field, maybe?
Yeah, presenting is a different animal. I mean, if you're lucky enough that you're not doing live presenting and you get some rehearsal time, it's not as dangerous. I appreciate the pressure because it's a different kind of pressure. It's a different setup. And again, it's using different tools. I mean, with presenting, there's a lot of stuff where it's using auto cue or teleprompter. So that's a completely different skill you have to learn. You've also got to be switched on the entire time. There is no turn off when you're a presenter. I've done some stuff in the fashion industry, and I've done some stuff with a YouTube channel called Push the Limit, which was all about the various different sports and health and fitness classes and stuff that are available to people in London. I got absolutely beasted in Green Park doing commando fitness, and it was the most upsetting 45 minutes where this former Marine absolutely ruined me for 45 minutes, and I had to try and present while not throwing up.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so presenting is a completely different challenge. It's also a case of I lend myself to doing research and trying to be personable as much as I can. And so with that, it's like, can I use these skills and put it into this? And it's also, it opens up different avenues, because with presenting, you could be talking about sport, you could be talking about the news, current affairs, music. And like I said, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, so my interests sort of cover all these things. So I have got like opinions when it comes to football and rugby, and Formula One. The same with music. My musical taste is very different from anyone I know, I would say. So yeah, all those sort of things. Being a presenter, it opens up those avenues where you can talk about your other passions, and you can also hopefully affect change on a personal level. Which being open about mental health is something where, like, when you can say openly, yep, I've struggled, and that gives a platform for other people to talk about it. And presenting, public speaking, they go hand in hand. My last public speaking engagement was a couple of years ago now, because I've been sort of concentrating elsewhere. And that was in Dublin at a tech conference, Tech in Film. And what was great about that was talking about where the industry is, knowing full well that by the time 6 months had passed, the industry has moved and shifted. And it was like, this is pertinent now, but it's not going to be pertinent in a year's time. And that's the great thing about it, is that you don't go into public speaking or presenting pre-rehearsed, because you can't, because what you've spoken about before has changed, and you've changed. And that's a thing from Mazner that I took, is from one moment to the next, you're not the same person you were. So from the person that started this conference call, you're a different person to now. And each time you take a breath, each time you blink, you're a different person. Every moment is different. So the same works for when you're delivering a speech, for when you're talking to people, for when you're presenting something. It's always different, and it's always a different moment and a different you doing that.
Thanks for sharing that. And just kind of drawing everything to a close today, do you have any kind of like major project other than the ones that we've discussed? Is there any kind of projects that you'd like to plug right now that are upcoming that we should look out for, or maybe you just have some like final thoughts you'd like to share with us or something like that?
Remind me of that. So in terms of projects that we have coming up, the first big fiction work that we're doing is the real life story of Tom Molyneux. It's called Let No Man Know, and it's about a free black slave who becomes the challenger for the British boxing belt in 1800, British boxing title. So it's the real life story of a slave in Louisiana whose dad was a Mandingo, and what happened is when his dad got too old, he replaced him as the Mandingo fighter. Then through a series of events and meeting a pugilist at that time, he becomes this fantastic Mandingo fighter. He earns his freedom through boxing and pugilism.
Oh, wow.
Ends up being incredible, moves from Louisiana to New York, has fights around there, builds up some notoriety. And then he's got enough money together, gets on a boat, and he's waiting for his trainer to turn up. And his trainer is killed on the streets of New York. And he ends up traveling to London on his own as a lone black man in London. He's mugged the first night. This is all true. It all happened. The first night in London, he's mugged, left with nothing. So he's now poor black, and alone in London in 1812. He seeks out a guy called Bill Richmond, who was known as the Black Terror. He was the first black boxer of any sort of real notoriety in England. And Tom begs to train with him. And Bill is of the opinion, you're an American fighter, you're of no use to me. He wears him down, and we get to this point where Tom Cribb, and there's the Tom Cribb pub in Soho. Tom Cribb is the boxer and huge, towering white man. And the British government brought Tom Cribb out of retirement to fight Tom Molyneux, to stop a black man from being the champion of Britain. So this was the first sort of real sort of controversy, if you will, of that type. But it's an incredible story, and the amazing part of it is Tom Cribb and Bill Richmond were very good friends, and Tom Molyneux and Tom Cribb became good friends as well. And what we're doing is, we, as a production company, we focus on compelling films for social change. And the idea is that, yes, this is a film about 1812, and this is a race film based in 2012, but this is as much about modern politics as it is relevant to period. So it carries a very modern message, and it's a very powerful modern message. So that's our next big fictional work that we're focusing on. We've also got a crime drama, which is based in Reading, all about Reading. It'll be very, very similar to Gangs of London, but all about Reading from like 1980 through to now. Then, yeah, we have a fantastic high concept piece called Killer's Romance, and that is about a man who falls on hard times. He's a former assassin, and he's living life as a homeless man near a phone box. Every time that phone box goes off, he is being given a new contract, a new hit. So he's like a homeless hitman. And he's dealing with the loss of his wife and being homeless and things like this. And it turns out that this hit is by a very wealthy businessman who's looking to assassinate the heiress of a company, and then he will inherit the company. So our hitman is following this woman around, and he starts to realize this woman is a lot like how my wife was, and he starts looking after her, being a guardian angel. There's nothing relationship wise about it. There's nothing, no emotion to it, but he's looking after her. So at the end of the film, we have a huge twist where she doesn't ever realize who he was, and so there's some real sort of emotional drama to that. So those are our big ones. We have a series of other films that we've got under shopping agreement at the moment. We've got a high concept crime horror, which is about possession and what happens when you sell your soul, which is an awesome concept. And we've also got one about the last Saxon, which is a period, quite fantastical period piece. Again, about a true to life guy, a guy called Hereward the Wake, who when the Tudor king came in England, he sent all the Saxon warriors off to France to fight. And they all got wiped out. While the Saxon warriors were away, he destroyed all the Saxon villages, wiped out the Saxon colonies. So when this one Saxon called Hereward the Wake returned to England and found all of the Saxons been wiped out, he goes on this revenge spree. It's John Wick meets King Arthur would be the way to put it. So yeah, that's what we're working on.
Damn, what aren't you working on? I expected maybe just like one or two, but like you got like a lot of stuff, and like I'm not trying to kiss your ass. Like it sounds like really interesting stuff, like stuff I would actually go and see. Like it's awesome.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
And you mentioned that you wanted me to mention this again to you. So do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah. Make sure you're doing what you enjoy would be the main thing. This year has been an absolute car crash in terms, and that's for everyone. And I think a lot of people are taking it to heart, and a lot of people are taking it very hard, and that's completely understandable. But it's important to look forwards. It's important to embrace the fact that you can change where you are, and you can change what is happening at the moment. It's not always about the here and now. It's about where you're going to be. And I think for a lot of people, you didn't work this hard and get to this point to just get to this point. So giving up or quitting or having coronavirus put a stop to things like that, that can't be the takeaway from this year. It has to be the fact that the challenges came, and the fact that now it's a case of you've had time to build and you've had time to assess. And far from it being an excuse, it's actually a motivation to push on.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you and having you on the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thanks, Christian. I really appreciate it.
Honestly, the pleasure's been mine. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you, everyone listening to the Christian Reeve podcast, whether you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, everywhere else. I can't list them all, guys. There's just so many now. But I do know that new ones are coming pretty much monthly at this point. So if there is a particular platform that you want to see the show on, let me know and we'll see if we can make it happen. But yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying the show, enjoying all the guests that we're having on the show. We've had quite a few different varied guests now. It's really starting to become something, and I'm very excited about where the future is leading for this podcast. So and I'm loving this. I absolutely love it. It's a lot of hard work, and it's but you know, I think anything in life that you enjoy doing ultimately is. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and until next time, peace out, one love. I'll see you in the next one.